Thank you, Jay. So I'm walking into a coffee shop to meet up with a friend. And it's one of those meetups where you're not sure if it's a date because you only agreed to hang out, but you totally hope it is a date because you're really into this person. And so I'm really into this girl, and I'm walking in the door. There I am, talking myself up. And I think to myself, this is going to be easy. All I have to do is make her laugh. And that right there was my biggest mistake. As soon as I started worrying about making her laugh and judging what I was going to say, I started censoring my ideas, and I got in my head, and I stopped connecting on a human level. And I don't care how cool you are, I know that we've all been there. My name is Jonathan Hebert, and I teach and perform improv comedy here at UNC with the Chapel Hill Players. But I'm not here to talk about comedy, and I'm also not here to give you dating advice. Comedy is the product that I create. I'm here to talk about improvisation, which is the process that I use to do it. And simply put, improv is when planning and action happen at the same time. So there's no difference between when we think of something or conceptualize it and when we say it and actually do it. And it's important to note that first and foremost, improvisation is a process for creating a finished product. Very rarely is improv the finished product that we're consuming. An exception to the rule are those pieces created at an improv comedy show or a jazz improvised concert or even a freestyle rap battle. There, you're consuming a product that is improvised right in front of you at the exact same time. But the more common case of us using improvisation is using it as a process to develop new ideas that ultimately becomes a final product. And so what can we expect from using this process of improvisation? We improvise for a simple reason. We want to create better ideas, we want to create them faster, and we want to create them more often. And improv is a process for doing exactly this. Learning how to improvise effectively helps us create better ideas faster and more often. And that's what I'm here exactly to tell you today. So what does this look like in practice? I was at a leadership conference where I was doing an exercise where I was prompted with a problem to solve. And then I was given 3 separate sheets of paper, each with their own instructions. The first sheet said, to come up with some realistic solutions for this problem and write them down. The second page said to come up with some stretch solutions, maybe a little bit less attainable ideas. But the third page instructed us to come up with fleeting ideas, proposals out of left field, or just any idea of inspiration about the topic. And this is a concept us improvisers call making the third choice. Our first reaction or our first choice is usually a knee-jerk reaction. Our second choice may be a bit more creative. But our third choice, or the ideas on this third page, are where we are truly innovating and creating. And so I realized that most of the ideas I wrote down on this third page were completely ridiculous, but I realized I had to get them out and flesh them out and build some creative momentum to access a couple of the ideas that ended up being really creative and viable solutions. And so I learned how to go there in this workshop. I learned how to access my third page of ideas, and I want to tell you how you can access your third page of ideas. And this is so important because top businesses and leadership organizations are already integrating this way of thinking into their work. So we need to look at what they're doing and how they're doing it. They're following the rules of improvisation, and I'm going to give you 3 of them right here. Rule number 1, everyone is a genius, yourself included. This is the first rule because it underlies everything else I'm going to talk about today. We have to treat our coworkers, classmates, peers, teammates, and ourselves like everything we say is brilliant, even if it's not. So why do we do this? This is an intentional mindset shift where we set up this baseline of support on top of which we can create as a team. We don't judge and we only support. Which brings us to the second rule. We say yes and. We use this improv tool of saying yes to affirm each other's ideas, and we add upon them with our own. So let's go back to the coffee shop. This girl asks me, so what did you do today? To which I brilliantly replied, I'm good, how are you? Yes, that made no sense. And that reminds me of this time where I was at dinner and the waitress said, enjoy your meal, and I said, thanks, you too. And And so now we're having this conversation about times where we screwed up or misspoke in public, all because I owned and yes-anded what was initially a mistake. I used this tool of positivity to turn an awkward situation into a really fun conversation. Brings us to the third rule: fail enthusiastically. We have to be willing and eager to fail, exactly like this. There we go. And it's all okay in the end. We have to be willing and eager to fail, because if we're not willing and eager to fail, we're going to be judging ourselves. And this is exactly why I was having so many awkward first dates. I was spending so much time judging my ideas instead of trusting them and worrying about whether or not it was going to be funny or sound cool, and I forgot to connect on a human level. And there's even some neuroscience to speak to this. Professor Dr. Charles Lim from Johns Hopkins University conducted an amazing study in which he had rap artists and jazz musicians come into his lab and perform inside an MRI scanner, so where he could take brain images of their results. And so what he had them do was take a sample of them performing a memorized piece of music, and then he had them improvise some music. And what he found was that the area of your brain associated with self-monitoring and censorship is deactivated when you're improvising. And so this is telling us that when we improvise effectively, we're shutting off that voice in our heads that says, wow, tell a different story, or that's not funny enough, or you're an idiot. And we can see that here shown in blue. So now that we've got this framework, we know that we need to treat everybody as geniuses. We know that we need to say yes and we know that we need to fail enthusiastically. Here's my challenge to you all. Schedule 20 minutes to improvise in your daily pursuits. So let's unpack this. I've just made a big claim, and it has two separate parts. First, what do I mean by scheduled improv time? We have to reserve time to intentionally engage in our process of improvisation and purposefully go to that third page of ideas. We're structuring unstructured time into our days. And the second part, and this is so important, we need to improvise in our own pursuits. So whatever it is that you're working on that day, whether it's work-related, personal life, social life, academic schoolwork, whatever it is that day, identify your daily pursuit, and it'll be different every single day. That's the topic of your improvisation. So here's what this looks like. Identify the topic of the day, prompt yourself, pull out your phone and start recording. Speak and give a voice to your stream of consciousness for 20 minutes. When you're done, go back and listen to what you've said. Most of it, just like the third page, is going to be completely ridiculous. But you'll find that some things that you will say will be new ways to look at problems and new angles and new ideas. Google gives us an excellent example of how this works in practice. They have what they call their 20% projects, in which employees are allowed to spend 20% of their time working on something outside of their job description. This is structured time in their days to prompt themselves with problems and improvise solutions. Gmail is a product of these 20% projects. And so remember, improvisation is the process and not the final product. So I'm not saying Gmail was improvised, but the ideas for Gmail came out of structured time to improvise solutions, and that's really powerful. So we understand businesses can use this. We understand how we can use this. What about those fields with a little bit less wiggle room? What about our architects, our doctors, and our dentists? We obviously don't want our architects to improvise a skyscraper, and we don't want our surgeons to fail enthusiastically when we're under the knife, because that's their final product. But scientific fields have their own method for discovery. It's the scientific method. And the common denominator between the scientific method and improvisation is that they're both processes for discovering new ideas. Scientists fail enthusiastically all the time. It's their job. Discovery starts with crazy ideas from the third page that become hypotheses that we test. And most of these hypotheses end up being flat out wrong. But the willingness to try and experiment leads to new scientific discovery. Great, so we understand scientists can use this thing. We understand how businesses can use this. But improv can be used for any deliverable product. If you've ever had to create something, you can use improvisation. Whether it's a presentation for class or work, whether it's a group project, whether it's a conversation you need to have with somebody in your life, or a talk you're giving in front of an audience, just like the one I'm doing right now. Improv is a tool for creating the final product. 3 weeks ago, my daily pursuit was to create this talk. So I took a shower. And I prompted myself with the topic of improvisation, and I pulled out my phone, and I just started speaking. I started speaking about improv and separating it from performance. I started talking about failing enthusiastically, saying yes and. I started talking about Google and structured improv time. And I even started talking about improvising in your own daily pursuits. And as I'm speaking to the shampoo bottle in front of me, I'm realizing that I'm shutting off that voice in my head and I'm allowing myself to get those third page ideas out. And the result is the talk that you're hearing today, all created through this process of improvisation. Improv has changed the way that I communicate. It's changed the way that I see deliverable products and the way I solve problems. Everybody in here can learn this method of thinking and apply it to their own daily pursuits. And everybody in here has a third page of amazing ideas. We just need to allow ourselves the creative license to access it. So schedule 20 minutes, prompt yourself, and improvise. Thank you.